Hi everyone, Squee here, and welcome to the audiobook version of Arena. Arena is a story that I've been writing and posting up in my forum. People are asking to read it, so I've been posting as I wrote it, and I've gotten back into writing it again after a very long break, and I had a few people request that I do an audiobook form of it and put it up on YouTube. And I kind of like the idea for several reasons. One, there's a lot of you guys who don't go to the forums, who may never see this otherwise, and may have actually been interested in seeing it. And two, since I'm starting to do audiobooks on a professional level, very, very slowly, but the more practice I get at a professional level of audio reading, the better. And thirdly, a lot of people have actually already read them. However, I have, especially in the prologue and a lot in chapter 1, I have rewritten and added a lot of stuff to it that a lot of people didn't get the first time they read it. I've added more information, made the prologue much more in depth than it used to be. So this is an interesting way. If you've already read the stuff on my forums, you can go back and read it again if you want. It has all the new stuff, or you can just listen to this and see the changes I made. I incorporated a lot of your advice into rewriting this material. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. I will release them as chapters, and I will release them as I write them. So don't expect this every day or even every week. I will just have to release them as I write them, and as anyone who writes knows, that could be some time. What I can do, however, I think would be interesting, is in between each episode, take your comments and thoughts and suggestions and respond to them. So have an episode, or a video on, like, say, chapter 1, and then have a video responding to all of your comments about chapter 1, your questions about the world, the characters, your advice on how to write, and et cetera, et cetera. And that way you can have a door into my thought process when writing this, if you're into the story. I welcome all sorts of critique. I love sharing the stuff, and I love sharing the stuff, I love seeing your views on what you think of my writing, what you think I can improve, or what you think I did really well, and keep that. As long as you're respectful about it, I will take any form of criticism to heart. I may not, follow it, because I may just simply have different ideals of it, but I will always take the criticism offered to heart. One thing I should point out, though, or a few things I should point out, if I ever actually finish this, I do intend on trying to publish it, because if you're going to write a book, you might as well publish it. So I don't want you to approach this as just an internet story. A lot of people write stories on the internet, and they're not too worried about the polish of it and all that, and that's fine. But this, I actually want you to approach it as if you were to pick up a book, an audio book, and listen to it. If you would have paid money for it, that's what you should be expecting. Hopefully a polished, finished work. And that's what I want to present with these audiobooks. So when you critique it, I want you to critique it with that level of quality in mind, whether I hit that standard or don't. That's how I want you to treat it. Now, things like punctuation, small grammatical errors, besides the fact that that's almost impossible to do while listening to an audiobook, I'm not too interested in that, because that's stuff that's just editing. It's not things I need advice on. I don't need people pointing out that I misspelled a word. I will catch it when I edit it. I'm more concerned about the style of writing, if it was enjoyable, if there was something I missed, etc., etc. I don't want to ramble on too much. I should point out, though, in addition to that, that this, even though it's in book form, this is seen in my mind as an anime, and it's going to be treated as an anime. I grew up watching shonen anime, fighting anime, where people have these great, fantastic fights with unique powers, and they grow and they become better, and they all had flaws, in my opinion. And I always thought to myself, man, if I wrote an anime, this is how I would do it. And that's what this is. An anime that bases, that concentrates so much on characters and story, that I think that's what adds to the fights and makes them special. But the point is, because this is treated as an anime, you could almost treat each chapter as an episode, and animes work differently than books, and I want you to keep that in mind when you go into this. Books take all the time in the world to set up their world and their situation, and whatever else they want to set up before the shit hits the fan, so to speak. Because books have that luxury. You bought the book, you're invested in it, you don't mind taking 60 pages to get the story set up. That's fine. Anime can't do that. They have to hook the viewer in the first episode or two. So animes work in a very different format. What they do is give you a very small amount of information about the world and then throw you into the fire. And at first you're sitting there going, wait, they cast that spell? They can cast spells? And as you watch the anime, you learn more and more about the world and the characters and how they interact, because you have to get hooked. And once you're hooked, they can slow down a bit and explain things. So I want you to understand that when you approach this audiobook, it will be written as an anime, in the sense that I will give you enough of the world to understand what's going on, and then I will basically throw you into the fire, and you'll have a lot of questions, but understand those questions will be answered as we go along. But other than that, I've rambled on for more than enough. Let's go ahead and get to it. Again, comments, suggestions, whatever, always appreciated, either in the YouTube comments or in the forum. I will leave a link to the section of the forum where this story takes place. You are more than welcome to leave discussions there. And I really, really just hope you guys enjoy this. I know it's very different from what I normally do, but sit back, relax, put on your favorite reading music. I don't plan to put any music to these because I want you to be able to pick your favorite song and just listen to this. You are also more than welcome to download this as an MP3, however you choose to do that. You have my full permission to do that. So yeah, here you go. I hope you enjoy The Arena. Prologue. Long ago, the gods were lonely. Eons of creating and destroying lifeless worlds had lost its appeal. They had grown tired of rocks that never answered their questions. They had grown tired of worlds that never stirred. And they had even begun to grow tired of each other. Petty arguments began to grow in importance, and the anger of the gods almost spilled into war. As the gods teetered upon the edge of destruction, Aishir, the creator, discovered the secret of life. She breathed it into the first animals by placing into each of them a small sliver of godly power that became their soul. The gods looked on in delight as nature took its course. The daily life of animals enthralled the gods as they struggled to eat and not be eaten. In time, however, the gods began to realize that this was all there would ever be. The animals' lives were consumed by nothing but the simple task of staying alive. For thousands of years, the animals never changed or deviated from what their ancestors had done. The gods again began to feel the shackles of boredom, and they turned to Aishir a second time to free them from it. This time, Aishir created a being she called humans. By breathing a larger spark of godly power into each human, Aishir gave them something animals could never have: the ability to imagine. Animals only saw the world the way it was. Humans, on the other hand, could imagine what the world could be. One day, a human looked at an eggshell that had a small hole in it made by a bird that had eaten the yolk and then discarded it. The bird had seen an eggshell and nothing more. The human, however, saw what the shell could be. She imagined using it to hold food or water and transform the shell into something more. Her imagination had allowed her to improve and change the way she lived. Imagination freed her from the endless cycle of stagnation that entrapped the animals around her. From these humble beginnings, the humans shaped the world around them. They built cities and formed civilizations. The gods watched over the humans in amazement. Finally, they had a cure to their endless boredom. Humans tirelessly sought to improve their lives and were constantly changing. The gods delighted in seeing the humans overcome adversity and swore an oath to never directly intervene to help or hurt the humans. After all, it was the unpredictability of the humans that made them so fascinating. Eventually, however, this oath was put to the test. In time, an enemy arose from the depths of the world to challenge the humans. A large insect the humans called a relay had risen to the top of the food chain under the earth and grown to vast numbers. Eventually, they traveled to the surface, searching for food. They swarmed across the land like an ocean. The humans fought against them, but their swords and shields were no match for the sheer weight of numbers the Arillae had. The gods began to panic as their beloved humans were slowly overrun. Having sworn to never interfere directly, the gods desperately searched for a way to save the human race. Eventually, they came up with a compromise. Turning to Aishir a third time, the gods begged her to create a new race with the power to help the humans. Aishir created this new race as she had the humans before, but with one exception. In addition to the spark of godly power that became their soul, Aishir gifted them with a second, smaller spark that the race could use to craft magic. While this magic paled in comparison to the power of the gods, it was hoped that it would be enough to beat back the Arillae. Aishir called this new race the Elves, and, at the urging of her fellow gods, implanted in them a deep desire to help the humans. None of the gods, however, could have foreseen the consequences of their actions. A generation of war with the Arillae had made humans harsh and untrusting. When the elves emerged from the forest offering to help the humans and asking nothing in return, they were met with suspicion and fear. Desperate for power, but terrified of the elves, humans did the unthinkable. They enslaved them. The innate desire to help humans prevented the elves from fighting back, and the entire race was enslaved and forced to fight the Arillae. The gods watched in horror as the elves were forced to do what they had offered to do freely. The Arillae were no match for the awesome force the elves brought to bear on them. This same force, however, made the humans even more fearful of the elves, and the treatment of the elves worsened. After the Arillae had been driven to near extinction, humans continued the enslavement of the elves until the gods could tolerate it no longer. Ignoring the pleas of Aishir not to act too quickly, the gods erased the innate desire all elves felt to help mankind. The gods should have listened. Overnight, the elves transformed from docile slaves to vicious, caged animals. The uprising was brutal and short. Humans were no match for the magic that was rained down upon them by a race that cried out in one enraged voice. The slaughter was so brutal that many of the elves became revolted by their own actions. In less than a week, the elves had annihilated over half the human race. The gods despaired as their own creations threatened to finish the job the Arillae had started. The human race was saved not by the gods, but by the elves themselves. Many elves could not bear the massacre they saw around them and cried out for peace. Between the Arillae and the anger of the elves, the human spirit had been shattered. Humans surrendered utterly and resigned themselves to the mercy of the elves. The elves debated among themselves what to do with the broken humans. Many of the elves cried for enslavement. They wanted retribution and demanded subjugation of the humans. Among the cries, one voice rose up against slavery. An elf, later named Inlor the Wise, realized that the actions of the humans had been an understandable response from a race driven to the brink of extinction. The elves had come at the humans' darkest hour, and as such, had only experienced their darkest side. He believed the two races had done enough evil to each other, and pleaded for his brothers and sisters to show the one thing neither side had yet to do: love and understanding. Many elves flocked to his pleas, and in time the elves were split into two groups: those who cried out for enslavement, and those who cried out for mercy. Eventually, two nations were born. The nation of Lycerin enslaved and horribly abused the now helpless humans, while the nation of Inlora tried to learn to love humans as equals again. Despite good intentions, the hearts of many elves still burned with the pain humans had inflicted upon them. While the humans of Inlora were free, they were by no means equal. They were seen as weak, second-class citizens and treated with disdain by most of their elven neighbors. While the Inlorans tried to coexist, Lycerian hatred for humans continued to grow. In time, they believed it was their right to enslave all humans. They viewed the elves of Enlora as traitors to their people and began to feel their fate should be the same as the humans they loved. And so, war broke out again. But this war was different. The power of the elves was unleashed on each other in a torrent of destruction. The devastation threatened to annihilate everyone, human and elf alike. The gods, who had been watching with mounting horror, could bear it no longer. They broke their oath and walked the earth in an attempt to put an end to the war. In the face of the gods themselves, the elves had no choice but to stop fighting. This was only a temporary fix, however, as the gods understood that they could stop the war, but they could not reconcile the differences of the two nations. In order to keep war from breaking out in the future, they turned a final time to Aishir. Against her better judgment, Aishir was persuaded to create a being of immense power named Scar. Scar was a demon of destruction, whose mind was bent solely on devastation. The gods forced the leaders of each nation to watch as Scar was created, so that they could bear witness to Scar's awesome power. Scar was then put into an everlasting slumber and hidden under the earth. The gods warned the elves that if ever war between the nations broke out again, Scar would awaken and bring ruin to all. Having witnessed the might of Scar firsthand, the leaders of Enlora and Lycerian had no choice but to make peace, or face annihilation. An end to war did not mean an end to the bitterness between the nations, however. The clever elves devised a way to settle their differences without war. They trained champions to compete in single combat. After all, two people fighting, no matter how brutal, could never be seen as a war. Great arenas were constructed for these battles, and the peoples of the nations would come to support their champion. As time passed, the two nations grew more and more apart, and disagreements became fewer. Eventually, single combat between nations became a rare occurrence. The importance of the fights could never be ignored, however, and both nations struggled to produce the best champions. Arena combatants fought others of their nation in non-lethal tournaments to prepare themselves for real combat. And so, time passed, and Arena, as it was called, became a national pastime and symbol of pride for both nations. Even the humans of Enlora came to love Arena, despite the fact that they were never strong enough to take part in it. For over 300 years, Arena remained a purely elven honor. If time has proven anything, however, it is that nothing ever stays the same. Sooner or later, something will rise up and change the world forever. It can be war, an act of nature, the will of an entire race, or sometimes, on rare occasions, change can be brought by a single soul with the strength to shape the entire world. A caravan slowly traveled down a dark road as the night was torn asunder by wind and rain. Horses struggled to pull their carts through the muddy road as the elves who rode them swathed themselves in heavy cloaks to fight the storm. At the head of the column rode two elves leaning close to each other to pass the time in conversation. Suddenly, one of them looked to his right and asked his companion, "Do you hear that?" A smooth female voice issued out from his companion. "Hear what?" The first elf guided his horse off the side of the road and followed a sound apparently only he could hear. 20 paces from the road, the elf stopped and lightly leaped from his horse to the tall, wet grass below. His hood fell down as he did so, and a shock of red hair splayed down to his shoulders behind his pointed ears. Dark green eyes searched the grass as his companion rode up behind him. "Jax, the caravan will ride on without us. What are you doing?" his companion called out to him. Jax ignored her as he continued to search the grass until he found what he had heard. A small baby elf lay swaddled in blankets, hidden by the tall grass. It cried desperately in the storm, and Jax tried to shield it as best he could from the wind and rain. He walked back to his companion and motioned for her to come down. "Selena! It's a child!" Selena slid off her horse and pulled down her hood to see better. Jet black hair flew wildly in the wind as she came over to stare wide-eyed at the child. A tiny baby girl lay cradled in Jax's arms, crying. Her small pointy ears were tinged red with cold, and she tried to push even harder against Jax to get away from it. "We need to get her out of the storm," Jax called over the roar of the wind. Selina nodded and led the 2 horses after Jax as he made his way back to the caravan. Soon, they were inside one of the larger wagons, and Jax was playing with the now very dry and very happy baby elf. Golden locks had begun to grow around her ears and seemed to make her chubby little face glow. She reached up for Jack's finger, and when he let her grasp it, she giggled. "We can find a good home for her in town before we head back to the arena," Selina said, sitting back against the wall of the other side of the wagon. The young elf had shed her heavy cloak and was now clad in tight-fitting leather. Jax was silent for a long moment as the little elf girl inspected his finger with both hands, as if it was the most interesting thing she had ever seen. Eventually, the girl looked from the finger to Jax and laughed happily. Jax smiled slowly. "I will give her a home." Selina's jaw dropped. "What? You? Jax, we're 18. We can't go around picking up babies." Jax raised an eyebrow. "We?" Selina dismissed him with a wave of her hand. "You know what I mean, you numbskull. You are barely an adult. You think you can raise a child?" Jax looked back down at the baby girl. "No, but for some reason, I feel like I was meant to find her." Selina sighed. "Jax, what about the arena? We just passed our trials. What about your dream to become a champion?" Jax looked intently at Selina. "Why do I have to give that up? There's nothing that says I can't do both." Selina sighed again and pinched the bridge of her nose with her thumb and forefinger while she squeezed her eyes shut. "You are an impossible man. I wash my hands of this. We are friends, but if you want to raise her, don't come crying to me when it gets too hard." "Selina," Jax said quietly, "come here." Selina grunted in frustration, but squatted down next to Jax and looked at him suspiciously as he took her hand and placed it over the baby girl. The girl let go of Jax's finger and grasped the new hand, giggling. After a moment, Selina let out a low gasp. "You can feel it too," Jax said quietly. "There are adult elves that don't have as much spiritual energy flowing through them. When this little girl grows up, she will be more powerful than any elf I have ever known." Selina slowly looked from the girl to Jax. You plan to teach her how to use it?" Jax shrugged. "That would depend on her, I guess. She could grow up and dream about being a florist for all I know. But if she chose to learn..." Selina stared down at the little girl in wonder before shaking her head. "Not a chance. I will train her before I let you. All you would do is teach her how to throw little stones around like a gardener." Jax grinned. "I thought you washed your hands of this." "Oh, shut up," Selina said quietly, already turning her attention back to the little girl. "She would need a name." Jax thought for a long moment. "What about Felicia?" Jax cupped his hand around the baby girl's face, and she snuggled against it with a smile and closed her eyes to sleep. "Hello, Felicia," Jax whispered to the sleeping baby. Jax sat next to the sleeping Felicia for hours as the caravan slowly traveled on through the night. And so time passed, and the world turned as it always had. Matters of great importance and small importance played out through the years as time marched on, until events that would shape the world unfolded. Events that would play out over many years and affect the lives of elves and humans alike. Events that started one morning 10 years after that fateful night on the road, as a little human boy stood in front of his house, swinging a small wooden sword. Well, that is the prologue. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And again, leave any comments, suggestions, advice either in the comments below, or you can follow the link to the forums. Each chapter, the prologue and chapter 1 and 2 and all that, have their own discussion thread, so you're more than welcome to place discussions there if you feel it's too long for YouTube comments. I really hope you guys enjoy this. I love this story, and I really hope to bring more of it to you guys. So I will actually be getting you chapter 1 and 2 rather soon, because they're already done. I just need to voice them and record them. So I will see you guys in chapter 1. Take care.